The territory of Heard Island and McDonald Island (SIMI) is an Australian external territory comprising a volcanic group of mostly barren Antarctic islands, about two-thirds of the way from Madagascar to Antarctica. The group's overall size is in area and it has of coastline. Discovered in the mid-19th century, the islands have been an Australian territory since 1947 and contain the country's two only active volcanoes. The summit of one, Mawson Peak, is higher than any mountain on the Australian mainland. The islands lie on the Kerguelen Plateau in the Indian Ocean. The islands are among the most remote places on Earth. They are located approximately southwest of Perth, southwest of Cape Leeuwin, Australia, southeast of South Africa, southeast of Madagascar, north of Antarctica, and southeast of the Kerguelen Islands. The islands are currently uninhabited.
Geography, wildlife, flora, constraints.
The islands are part of the southern Indian Ocean Islands tundra ecoregion that includes several subantarctic islands. In this cold climate, plant life is mainly limited to grasses, lichens, and mosses. Low plant diversity reflects the island's isolation, small size, severe climate, the short, cool growing season and, for Heard Island, substantial permanent ice cover. The main environmental determinants of vegetation on subantarctic islands are wind exposure, water availability, parent soil composition, salt spray exposure, nutrient availability, disturbance by trampling from seabirds and seals and, possibly, altitude. At Heard Island, exposure to salt spray and the presence of breeding and molting seabirds and seals are particularly strong influences on vegetation composition and structure in coastal areas.
History.
Evidence from microfossil records indicates that ferns and woody plants were present on Heard Island during the Tertiary period with a cool and moist climate. Neither group of plants is present today, although potential tertiary survivors include the vascular plant Pringlianthus scorbutico and 6 moss species. Volcanic activity has altered the distribution and abundance of the vegetation. The vascular flora covers a range of environments and, although only 6 species are currently widespread, glacial retreat and the consequent connection of previously separate ice-free areas is providing opportunities for further distribution of vegetation into adjacent areas.
Flowering plants and ferns.
Low-growing herbaceous flowering plants and bryophytes are the major vegetation components. The vascular flora comprises the smallest number of species of any major subantarctic island group, reflecting its isolation, small ice-free area and severe climate. 12 vascular species are known from Heard Island, of which 5 have also been recorded on McDonald Island. None of the vascular species is endemic, although Pringlianthus scobutica, Colobanthus kerguelensis, and Bo kerguelensis occur only on subantarctic islands in the southern Indian Ocean. The plants are typically subantarctic, but with a higher abundance of the cushion-forming Azorellus eligo than other subantarctic islands. Heard Island is the largest subantarctic island with no confirmed human-introduced plants. Areas available for plant colonization on Heard Island are generally the result of retreating glaciers or new ice-free land created by lava flows. Today, substantial vegetation covers over 20 square kilometers of Heard Island, and is best developed on coastal areas at elevations below 250 meters.
Mosses and liverworts.
Bryophytes, mosses and liverworts contribute substantially to the overall biodiversity of Heard Island, with 43 mosses and 19 liverworts being recorded, often occupying habitats unsuitable for vascular plants, such as cliff faces. Bryophytes are present in most of the major vegetation communities including several soil and moss-inhabiting species. A 1980 survey of McDonald Island found lower diversity than that on Heard Island. 4 mosses and a number of algal species are recorded from there.
Algae.
At least 100 species of terrestrial algae are known from Heard Island, commonly in permanently moist and ephemeral habitats. Forests of the giant Antarctic kelp Dervaleo antarctica occur at a number of sites around Heard Island and at least 17 other species of seaweed are known, with more to be added following the identification of recent collections. Low seaweed diversity is due to the island's isolation from other land masses, unsuitable beach habitat, constant abrasion by waves, tides and small stones, and the extension of glaciers into the sea in many areas.
Vegetation communities.
Heard Island has a range of terrestrial environments in which vegetation occurs. 7 general vegetation communities are currently recognized, although vegetation composition is considered more of a continuum than discrete units. Subantarctic vegetation is minimal and includes small types of shrubbery, including mosses and liverworts. Open cushion field vegetation is the most widespread and abundant vegetation type on Heard Island. It is characterized by Azorellus eligo cushions interspersed with bryophytes, small vascular species and bare ground with 20 to 75% cover, and found mainly at altitudes between 30 to 70 meters. Fellfield describes vegetation with abundant bare ground and less than 50% plant cover. Fellfield may occur as a result of harsh climatic and aridophic factors, or recent deglaciation which has exposed bare ground. Mossy Fellfield is a community with high species richness and consists of bryophytes and small Azorellus eligo cushions. It is found at altitudes between 30 to 150 meters in areas with intermediate exposure. Wet mixed herbfield occurs on moist substrate, mostly on moraines and moistly slopes, often in association with burrowing petrels colonies at low altitude 40 meters where the water table is at or close to the surface. Species richness is highest here of all the communities, with dominant species being Bocookii, Azorellus eligo, Pringliantis scobutica, Acanna magellanica, and Deschamps antarctica. Coastal biotic vegetation is dominated by Bocookii and Azorellus eligo, occurring mainly on coastal sites of moderate exposure and in areas subject to significant influence from seals and seabirds. Salt spray vegetation is dominated by the salt-tolerant moss Mulleriella crassifolia and limited in extent, being found at low elevations on lavas in exposed coastal sites. Closed cushion field is found on moraines and sand at altitudes mostly below 60 meters, and is dominated almost entirely by Azorellus eligo cushions that often grow together to form continuous carpets which can be subject to burrowing by seabirds.
Outlook.
One of the most rapidly changing physical settings in the subantarctic has been produced on Heard Island by a combination of rapid glacial recession and climate warming, the consequent increase in habitat available for plant colonization, plus the coalescing of previously discrete ice-free areas, has led to marked changes in the vegetation of Heard Island in the last 20 years or so. Other species and vegetation communities found on subantarctic islands north of the Antarctic convergence now absent from the Heard Island flora may colonize the island if climate change produces more favorable conditions. Some plant species are spreading and modifying the structure and composition of communities, some of which are also increasing in distribution. It is likely that further changes will occur, and possibly at an accelerated rate. Changes in population numbers of seal and seabird species are also expected to affect the vegetation by changing nutrient availability and disturbance through strand pulling. One plant species on Heard Island, Poanua, a cosmopolitan grass native to Europe, was possibly introduced by humans, though is more likely to have arrived naturally, probably by skuas from the Kerguelen Islands where it is widespread. It was initially recorded in 1987 in 2 deglaciated areas of Heard Island not previously exposed to human visitors, while being absent from known sites of past human habitation. Since 1987 Poanua populations have increased in density and abundance within the original areas and have expanded beyond them. Expeditioner boat traffic during the Australian Antarctic Program expedition in 1987 may be at least partly responsible for the spread, but it is probably mainly due to dispersal by wind and the movement of seabirds and seals around the island. The potential for introducing plant species including invasive species not previously found on subantarctic islands by both natural and human-induced means is high. This is due to the combination of low species diversity and climatic amelioration. During the 2003-04 summer a new plant species, Cochila plumosa, was recorded. Only one small specimen was found growing on a coastal river terrace that had experienced substantial development and expansion of vegetation over the past decade. The species has a circumant Arctic distribution and occurs on many subantarctic islands.
Fungi.
71 species of lichens have been recorded from Heard Island, and they are common on exposed rock, dominating the vegetation in some areas. As with plants, a 1980 survey of McDonald Island found lower diversity there, with just 8 lichen species and a number of non-lichenized fungi recorded.
Fauna.
The main indigenous animals are insects along with large populations of ocean-going seabirds, seals and penguins.
Mammals.
Sealing at Heard Island lasted from 1855 to 1910, during which time 67 sealing vessels are recorded visiting, 9 of which were wrecked off the coast. Relics that survive from that time include tripods, casks, hut ruins, graves and inscriptions. This caused the seal populations there to either become locally extinct or reduced to levels too low to exploit economically. Modern sealers visited from Cape Town in the 1920s. Since then the populations have generally increased and are protected. Seals breeding on Heard include the southern elephant seal, the Antarctic fur seal and the subantarctic fur seal. Leopard seals visit regularly in winter to haul out, though they do not breed on the islands. Craybeater, Ross and Weddell seals are occasional visitors.
Birds.
Heard Island and the McDonald Islands are free from introduced predators and provide crucial breeding habitat in the middle of the vast Southern Ocean for a range of birds. The surrounding waters are important feeding areas for birds, and some scavenging species also derive sustenance from their cohabitants on the islands. The islands have been identified by BirdLife International as an important bird area because they support very large numbers of nesting seabirds. 19 species of birds have been recorded as breeding on Heard Island and the McDonald Islands, although recent volcanic activity at the McDonald Islands in the last decade is likely to have reduced vegetated and unvegetated nesting areas. Penguins are by far the most abundant birds on the islands, with 4 breeding species present, comprising king, gentoo, macaroni and eastern rockhopper penguins. The penguins mostly colonize the coastal tussock and grasslands of Heard Island, and have previously been recorded as occupying the flats and gullies on McDonald Island. Other seabirds recorded as breeding at Heard Island include 3 species of albatross wandering, black-browed and light-mantled albatrosses, southern giant petrels, Cape petrels, 4 species of burrowing petrels, Antarctic and Fulmar prions, common and South Georgian diving petrels, Wilson's storm petrels, kelp gulls, subantarctic skuas, Antarctic terns and the Heard shag. Although not a true seabird, the Heard Island subspecies of the black-faced sheathbill also breeds on the island. Both the shag and the sheathbill are endemic to Heard Island. A further 28 seabird species are recorded as either non-breeding visitors or have been noted during at-sea surveys of the islands. All recorded breeding species, other than the Heard Island sheathbill, are listed marine species under the Australian Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Act 1999. 4 are listed as threatened species and 5 are listed migratory species. Under the EPBC Act, a recovery plan has been made for albatrosses and giant petrels, which calls for ongoing population monitoring of the species found at Himi. And at the time of preparing this plan, a draft recovery plan has also been made for the Heard Island cormorant or shag and Antarctic tern. The recorded populations of some seabird species found in the reserve have shown marked change. The king penguin population is the best studied seabird species on Heard Island and has shown a dramatic increase since first recorded in 1947-48. With the population doubling every 5 years or so for more than 50 years. A paper reviewing population data for the black-browed albatross between 1947 and 2001 suggested that the breeding population had increased to approximately 3 times that present in the late 1940s, although a Convention for the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources CAMEL working group was cautious about the interpretation of the increasing trend given the disparate nature of the data, as discussed in the paper. The discovery of a large, previously unknown, colony of herd shags in 2001 at Cape Pillar raised the known breeding population from 200 pairs to over 1,000 pairs. No landing took place on the islands until March 1855, when sealers from the Corinthian, led by Erasmus Darwin Rogers, went ashore at a place called Oil Barrel Point. In the sailing period from 1855 to 1880, a number of American sealers spent a year or more on the island, living in appalling conditions in dark smelly huts, also at Oil Barrel Point. At its peak the community consisted of 200 people. By 1880 sealers had wiped out most of the seal population and then left the island. In all the islands furnished more than 100,000 barrels of elephant seal oil during this period. A number of wrecks have occurred in the vicinity of the islands. There is also a discarded building left from John Hurd's sealing station which is situated near Atlas Cove. The first recorded landing on McDonald Island was made by Australian scientists Graham Budd and Hugh Thielander on the 12th of February 1971, using a helicopter. The islands have been a territory of Australia since 1947, when they were transferred from the UK. And VK0JS and VK0NL the Chains 2 expedition, with a further operation in January 1997 VK0E. The recent expedition in March 2016 VK0E was organized by Cordell Expeditions, and made over 75,000 radio contacts. Mawson Peak atop Big Ben was first climbed on the 25th of January 1965 by 5 members of the Southern Indian Ocean Expedition to Herd Island, sometimes referred to as the Paytainla Expedition. The second ascent was made by 5 members of the Herd Island Expedition 1983, sometimes referred to as the Anaconda Expedition. The U.S. Navy vessels and were used to transmit signals which could be detected as far away as both ocean coasts of the U.S. and Canada. The Corichuist was chosen because of its central moon pool and because it was already equipped with an array of low-frequency transmitters. A phase-modulated 57 Hz signal was used. The experiment was successful and demonstrated that such sound waves could travel as far as the Antipodes. Planned transmissions had been for 10 days, although owing to the bad weather conditions and the high failure rate of the transmitter elements, used at a frequency below their design frequency, the transmissions were terminated on the 6th day, when only 2 of the original 10 transducers were still working.
Retreat of Herd Island glaciers.
Herd Island is a heavily glaciarized, subantarctic volcanic island located in the Southern Ocean, roughly 4,000 kilometers southwest of Australia. 80% of the island is covered in ice, with glaciers descending from 2,400 meters to sea level. Due to the steep topography of Herd Island, most of its glaciers are relatively thin, averaging only about 55 meters in depth. The presence of glaciers on Herd Island provides an excellent opportunity to measure the rate of glacial retreat as an indicator of climate change. Available records show no apparent change in glacier mass balance between 1874 and 1929. Between 1949 and 1954, marked changes were observed to have occurred in the ice formations above 5,000 feet on the southwestern slopes of Big Ben, possibly as a result of volcanic activity. By 1963, major recession was obvious below 2,000 feet on almost all glaciers, and minor recession was evident as high as 5,000 feet. The coastal ice cliffs of Brown and Stevenson glaciers, which in 1954 were over 50 feet high, had disappeared by 1963 when the glaciers terminated as much as 100 yards inland. Retreat of Herd Island glaciers is most dramatic on the eastern section of the island, where the termini of former tidewater glaciers are now located inland. Based on the findings of that expedition, the rate of loss of glacier ice on Herd Island appears to be accelerating. Between 2000 and 2003, repeat GPS surface surveys revealed that the rate of loss of ice in both the ablation zone and the accumulation zone of Brown Glacier was more than double average rate measured from 1947 to 2003. The increase in the rate of ice loss suggests that the glaciers of Herd Island are reacting to ongoing climate change, rather than approaching dynamic equilibrium. The islands are contained within a marine reserve and are primarily visited for research, meaning that there is no permanent human habitation.